Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us this afternoon. I'm Melanie Sanderson from the Good Schools Guide. For those of you that haven't been past our stand today, we review 1,300 schools across the UK, independent, unbiased. And if you want to learn more, you can swing by our stand today. We're actually doing 50% off subscriptions today as well. I've got with me Jenny Brown, headmistress of City of London School for Girls, and Elizabeth Stone, the headmaster of Winchester College. Jenny was educated at North London Collegiate before reading English at Oxford. She was formerly head teacher at St Albans High School for Girls and has been headmistress at City Girls since 2019. She's also taught at Highgate School, Southampton High, Channing and St Paul's Girls, where she was director of senior school. So she's got a really deep understanding of the nuances and pressures of highly academic settings. Elizabeth Stone was previously head of Queenswood School in Sydney. She has followed a truly Anglo-Antipodean path. Her Sydney schooling was punctuated by 6 months at St Paul's Girls' School, her degree from University of New South Wales, and then back to England, where she's taught at Winchester and Cheltenham Ladies' College, then Sydney for her first headship, and now here we are, back at Winchester. So I'm going to dive straight in with the question that's probably burning on everyone's lips. If you want to get into a highly academic school, is academic ability the only criteria? Elizabeth, would you like to start off on that one?
No, absolutely not. It would be quite easy for us to set an exam, run a ruler down the number of places and just draw a line. And that would do two things wrong. One is that it would potentially miss children of extraordinary talent who have bumpy profiles. And I was literally last week in a meeting for our scholars, and there was a very borderline decision, and bear in mind this is for scholars, not just for entry into the college, it's for the very, very, very top. And one child we looked at and we thought, this kid's definitely going to, in a couple of years' time, get straight 9s at GCSEs, it's all going to be wonderful. Extremely clever child. But there was another one who, if I'm honest, the maths was abominable. I mean, terrible. But he made the head of English cry with his composition. And he, by the way, didn't answer the question. Was asked to write an essay and, in fact, wrote a poem that scanned and made the head of English cry. And we just looked at that and went, wow, that is exceptional. And so in the end, that was the child that got the scholarship. So that's at the very top end, but right along the way, we're interviewing, we're looking for curiosity about what they're going to bring into the classroom, how they're going to fit into the community, because we want them contributing at every level. We're very interested in the range of activities. Are they sporty? Are they musical? Are they like an avid coin collector? We just want a child that is interested and hungry to learn.
That's great. Jenny?
That's a lovely answer. I just want to know if he's still making the head of English cry. and I just, for the avoidance of doubt, making our head of English cry would not necessarily be the recommended route. However, I mean, I totally agree with you, Elizabeth. It is, we're always... Of course, there are some characteristics. There are some characteristics that you can say in a very general sense. I often talk in terms of this metaphor, are the headlights on? Is there a kind of curiosity for learning, an interest in things? They like to know stuff. And that, for a 10-year-old, 9-year-old, 10-year-old, never mind 4, 5, 6-year-old, in our case, young girl, doesn't necessarily look like X amount on a CAT score or X amount in a maths paper and an English paper. And you will have heard this, and I know you will have heard it in all sorts of talks, that, we really try to make room to understand the individuals in front of us. And really, there is, of course, there's got to be, lots of different ways of understanding whether they're going to be a fit, whether it's going to feel like a fit for them and somewhere where they're going to feel comfortable. But we do spend a lot of time, and just, if it's helpful, it's probably worth you knowing that, per pupil, each pupil will get something like 5 hours worth of attention, each application, before before being offered a place. So we are really thoughtful. The other thing, and I'm sure this is the same with Winchester, but really we have great relationships with the heads of prep schools, junior schools, primary schools, and they know the people in their care incredibly well, and we are very attentive to what they're saying. So particularly if it looks like someone's done surprisingly badly, we will take pay attention to that and really, as I say, try and find another way of
I've got
time with them.
A great example of that, of a pupil who graduated last year, won medals in his A-levels within the school, gone on to Oxbridge, actually didn't initially pass the entrance, but the head of the prep school rang up and said, you need to take another look. So we didn't just take it on the word, we put him through his paces again. And he came and did himself and us proud.
I do think maybe this is just me, but I'm always slightly suspicious of people that look like they're peaking in year 2. It's like, my lovely son, he's now about to start his PhD, but in nursery, we had to have a very earnest parents' evening because he's counting to 20. He kept missing out 16. And what were we going to do about this? And I just looked at her blankly, thinking, I think he'll probably get 16 by the time he's doing GCSEs. I don't know. Anyway, there it is.
There's some excellent anecdotes coming out here. Keep them coming, please. So just moving on a little bit, I think something else that parents always ask about is tutoring. I'm going to ask you to be really straight here with the people in the room. Is tutoring necessary, and can you really get into a school like City Girls or into Winchester without any?
100% yes. 100%. I can expand on that, but
can I? Yes. I was going to say. So
yes.
I would love to say that, and I do, and I absolutely stand by that. And again, you will have heard this many times, but we work very hard to try and make sure that our assessments in all sorts of different ways are tutor-proof. But I remember being quite told off, and properly so, by someone who became a parent, who was saying that actually when you said that in open day, it just was sort of discombobulating because everyone in that room, a child had a tutor. And so it just sort of doesn't land. So I'm now really nervous about sort of saying that. What I can say, and again, I think it rather depends what the starting point is. But particularly schools that are perhaps, not absolutely, going hell for leather for the 11 plus, having some kind of thoughtful, tailored practice for an 11 plus is probably not a bad thing. But, the big question you've always got to ask yourself is you do not want your child to be somewhere where they're getting amazing teaching, but they can only continue to be comfortable in that place by a kind of raft of extra tuition. That would be a disaster. That would not be a comfortable fit for them. So I want the answer to be no, but I do recognise the real politic as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, look, I would just say, obviously, as a colleague of mine put it, if there's a pothole in the road, fix it, right? If they had a bad time with fractions in year 3 and they still haven't got fine, go and get the tutoring sorted out. If what we're doing is the classic sort of hothousing so that they are, in some sense, overperforming at entrance and they just can't keep it up and they're going to be bumping along the bottom, this is not a good strategy for your child. It's not going to serve them well. We do have plenty of parents who've told me flat out, I'm amazed we got in, we didn't tutor, everybody around me was tutoring. Can I say, my heart goes out to you, particularly in London. And when I was head of a school in Sydney, it struck me that I had a steady trickle of online admissions interviews with parents who were saying, I've got a chance to, move to Australia or get a job in Australia, and actually we're so unsettled by the intensity of the school race in London that we're thinking of moving to Australia. And I don't think you have to go quite that far. I think there are alternatives for you. But it is nerve-wracking. I've done it with my children. You've done it with yours. You sort of go around looking at it and then you feel totally inadequate. I remember sending my son in for an interview for something which he was grossly unprepared, and I kicked myself down afterwards. But you know what? I'm kind of glad we didn't do that. It is easy, and I don't want to be glib. But should you worry about as much as you probably are? No.
And Jenny, you mentioned your son not showing his full potential in year 2, which is I think, a familiar story to most of us. But at what point can a parent determine if their child is cut out for a school that requires, a very hard entrance exam to get in, and also hard work and commitment and, raw intellect to keep up? We have parents coming to us with babies saying, I want my child to go to Habs or St Paul's or, any of these schools like yours. At what point can a parent really know that their child's got a shot?
I suppose 2 answers there. And I think, well, first of all, trust yourself. I really feel, you know your child. You know your child. Although having said that, of course, again, the old test of where do you see things most clearly. You do know them and you understand their potential, but sometimes a little bit of distance is useful as well. And therefore, this is why I think really listening to your to the educators who are educating your child now, or that is really also very, very important. And they will be giving advice in your child's best interest. So, but I think in the end, you trust your gut. And the other thing, you use the brilliant phrase "have a shot," which I'm afraid is sort of like catnip to me. I'm like, why wouldn't you have a shot? To some degree, I'm thinking Hamilton. Give it a go. What's to lose? I think the important thing is, and this, everyone in this room is part of this. Let's just agree it now. That we keep the temperature low on it. So easy to say, but they will. That keeping perspective. And again, my son will never forgive me, but I remember getting 19% in a Latin exam in year 7. It was so funny. Sorry, I think it's funny. Poor guy. He is a successful 24-year-old now. But exactly, it could have been the end of the world but we thought it was absolutely brilliant because he would learn his lesson and did. I do think it's quite important. They are all going to find fantastic places to be, and you keeping perspective in it is really important for them and will help them do their best. So I would err on the side of optimism, because why not? And I would also listen really carefully to those in it.
Elizabeth?
Look, I'm going to say something a little bit hard, but I hope that perhaps you find it encouraging and liberating. The kid's going to be fine. Most of the time, the problem lies with the parents, in that you're so desperate and you're worried for their future and so on. If you can hold it lightly, like Jenny said, imagine a world, right, where this was not high stakes and you were excited about learning and you're sending them to good schools and you're doing all the things I'm sure you're doing about reading and discussion at the dinner table and all of those wonderful things that you can do with them. And then you went, okay, honey, next week you're going into the exams. Give it your best shot, darling. And then you take them out for pizza afterwards. And then you open the envelope. Didn't work out. Oh, well, oh, fantastic, it did. No child is going to be desperately harmed by that process. It's the adults around them, and it's not just parents, of course. It's the whole, as you've rightly said, the whole social circle around it. They will, above all, take their lead from you. So you need to step up and actually believe in what you believe in as parents. And if this is the be-all and end-all, then you need to tiger mum them, right? Because, if you honestly believe their entire life is staked on this, well, your work is cut out because suddenly you've got to get into, North London Collegiate, right? But actually, if we're honest and we step back out of it, we know this is not the make or break. And I'm very happy to detail my son's failures as well, and my daughter's. I've sat with them. We've had wonderful successes and then times where they've just absolutely bombed. And both of them will tell you that. And they're absolutely flourishing. Hold it lightly.
That's great advice. Thank you so much. Now, if you're, whether you're in London as a parent looking for London day schools for your child or looking for more of a boarding model, what would you say is the right number of schools for parents to apply for? That's another question we get asked all the time. So they want to hedge their bets, obviously, but what would you say is too much and what's not enough?
Shall I start?
Yes,
I think maybe a good starting point, again, sort of thinking similarly as we might do for universities. I think probably about 5. and with a nice sort of range. Anything more than that, and honestly, again, you're sort of, okay, that's a lot of work for them, and I would think unnecessary. So again, it's sort of front loading the thinking so that you've got enough of a good sort of range of different fits.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, look, I can't. It's your family and your child. You have to decide. For myself, I think I would like to have, one aspirational thing, one insurance offer, in the sense of, that I'm confident that they can get in and that, and then maybe one other. I do think sometimes with the whole framework of how we're thinking about this is sort of gaming it and what are the odds and how am I going to win the prize. Look at more than will they get in. Think about, is this the right place for them? There won't be, if you really think about that, there won't, I mean, there'll be lots of schools where they can just be fine and wonderful, but if you're really trying it out, some of them will stand out and you think, I can really see them there. Just concentrate on those things and your child will be fine.
Yeah, I think the exam process can take a lot out of children. And one thing that I see as well, an awful lot of the time, is when parents have got their child in a prep school, but they're not necessarily taking the advice of the headmaster. So I would say, drawing on what you said earlier, Jenny, if your child is in a prep school and the head thinks that they've got a good shot at School X, which is on your list, I would trust in that process as well and not put your child through too many entrance exams. I think in London, 5 probably feels like the maximum. So I think moving on to the next point, people always have preconceptions, don't they, about schools like Winchester and City Girls? They think they know what it's like. What would you say are the biggest misconceptions that people hold about your respective schools and about what it's like to be in a very academic environment in general?
Oh, this is fun. Can I go first?
Yeah. Yeah.
So the first time I went to Winchester was in 2008 when I came across with my family initially as a teacher, and then I came back later on as a head. I didn't know that the school existed, but had you described to me some 640-year-old boys' school with ancient buildings and, known for being the sort of home of Nobel Prize winners and, all sorts of... I would have thought, my goodness, I will not fit in. I'm an Australian woman. I have got no experience of these things whatsoever. I'm clearly not, believe me, most of the time I'm the dumbest person in the room when I work with my colleagues. How am I going to keep up with all of that? And I just thought that I would have thought that there would be all of these sort of social and intellectual and cultural barriers. It's the most welcoming, accepting place I have ever worked in, which is kind of bizarre. And so just the ability of the school to accept you for who you are is exceptional. And, when I was appointed head and happened to be the first woman to have done that, there are a whole lot of people going, oh my goodness, going into a boys' school, 600, how's it's going to be like? And I knew, because I've worked before, I said, you can come here and be yourself. So I think there's that, and then I think part of it is there is a misconception that it is just about eggheads, and if you're not, you might not be weird enough to come to Winchester, which is so not true, right? Like we're just completely normal people, and we have some absolute brilliant people in there. Most kids are just completely, normal and lovely and love football and, love rock bands and all of those things. It's a very welcoming place.
Great, thank you. Jenny?
I think probably maybe there are 2 misconceptions, and one actually answers the sort of second part of that that being at City Girls in a sort of selective school is tantamount to being in a kind of exam factory or hothouse. So I think people are often surprised at how lightly exams play at all in the school. I mean, they really do. We don't have any grades, for instance, of any kind for the first 3 years. And, it's it's really just about scholarship, for sure. And by the way, a very kind of grounded, a very rooted scholarship. We are in and of the city, so it is, it's about really thinking about building the shapers of the future, but it is grounded, it's very anchored. But I think it's not what the exam results, of course, at the other end might lead some people to believe. It really, really does not feel like that. And there's space for the individual just to sort of grow. And again, like Elizabeth, that lovely point, there's space for the quirky, for the crazy, for the sort of developing learner, for those that are really fun. There isn't a city type, but there is a city community. And the community, and also the kind of the way in which that is lifelong is, I think, I don't know whether that's surprising or not, it is absolutely lovely. I absolutely adore that. I adore the fact that it is. And it's really important because, again, if you think about the things that, is it the Harvard longitudinal study that says that, the biggest single driver of happiness, and I think they asked sort of people over many, many decades up into their 70s, was their ability to make really positive relationships at school. That was the most important thing in education that we could be doing as schools. So, okay, great. You get X in your GCSEs and A-levels and then whatever, Y, go to Y institution. Lovely. But actually the things that were guaranteeing fulfillment and happiness were about the quality of the relationships built in childhood. So we spend a huge amount of time and space on that. Every pupil will be trained in coaching, will have coaching, every member of staff, every parent, if they want it. So, that's just sort of one example of how it manifests. But I do think that, we are, I hope, the opposite of a hothouse, whatever the results tell you.
Can a child with a diagnosed special educational need thrive in schools like yours? Can parents whose children are diagnosed consider them eligible to apply?
Yeah, absolutely. And, obviously, some disabilities get in the way and some are just ones that you work around. And we need to make sure that any pupil who comes in can actually access the curriculum, but then we work flexibly around that. I can list off to you any number of pupils who have various kinds of disabilities who've achieved at the absolute top level. And, in fact, I've got one in mind who, at the age of 4, their parents were told that they would never be able to go to a mainstream school or get a credential, and 4 A stars at A-level later. They've been proven wrong. Fantastic. Jenny?
I mean, again, absolutely, our SEND department is phenomenal, second to none. There's, the study centre around it. I mean, there's no issue whatsoever. It's absolutely part of the provision. It's part of the understanding, again, of meeting an individual where they are. And there are all sorts of different ways that people learn and experience the world, and our job is to provide for those individuals wherever they are.
That's wonderful, thank you. This 25 minutes has absolutely flown by, really. I'd like to open the floor to questions now, if that's okay. Yeah, the lady. Yeah.
Hi, a really basic question, and then another probably basic question, short. The first is, given it's not all about grades and exams, etc., what is a highly academic school? And then the next one is, if exams and grades and 11 plus results aren't that important, how come the references section of the application process or the interviews, how come they don't come first in the process?
It's a great question. Elizabeth, do you want to answer the first bit and then maybe to Jenny for the second?
Yeah, I brought this. Here's one I put it earlier. This is the distinction between grades and a highly academic school. So this is an exemplar paper from one of the exam boards for English literature. I'm going to read you the first couple of sentences of what they say is a top essay grade 9 answer. The scene in which Lady Macbeth's influence is clearest is Act 1, Scene 7. It begins with a soliloquy showing Macbeth's uncertainty. His euphemisms for murder, like taking off or simply it, suggest evasiveness, and he uses biblical imagery, which shows his fear of judgment. Okay? Good. Clearly this kid knows what they're doing. This is a child who's a year prior to GCSE who wrote this for us under exam conditions. Macbeth is a play gripped by instability. Written in 1606, shortly after the ascension of James I, a new monarch obsessed with witchcraft, lineage, and the divine right of kings, Shakespeare's shortest tragedy reflects a world in political and moral flux. From the witch's paradoxes to the play's mirrored rises and falls, Macbeth unfolds in a universe of blurred boundaries where good and evil, truth and illusion, male and female are no longer opposites but overlapping conditions. That would not only not be recognised as a top grade, but would be penalised in a GCSE exam. All right, it's making reference to a whole lot of things that are not part of the syllabus, and I can tell. I mean, this is fizzing. It is firing off the page, and that is not what the GCSE syllabus is about. So, if you are serious about inculcating a love of literature and that level of excellence, I mean, that's well into sort of undergraduate territory, right? From a 14-year-old. That's the difference between something that's just about exams and grades and one that's actually truly about loving learning for its own sake. And so you need to do your research as you look at it and find, and I can list hundreds of examples, and I'm sure Jenny can, in schools that make that difference. But you will not be able to tell just on exam grades.
That's a great answer. And Jenny...
it's an amazing answer, and I'm just hoping it's not incredibly bad luck to quote Macbeth. What an amazing thing. Thank you for sharing it. I feel your pain, because going back to the question about, if results don't matter, how can we use them in any way, shape or form, in references or in anything else? I mean, look, results, I guess, they're not totally irrelevant in the sense that they are society's way of holding us to account, aren't they? Or one of them. They are a measure. But I completely agree with Elizabeth. The learning is not instrumental. It's of intrinsic benefit. That's the point. And I think, it's kind of crazy to... I can talk about the fact that, for instance, you might come into a lesson at City and think, well, that's weird. It looks sort of, I don't know, it looks kind of slightly very vocal and, not sort of biddable. It's not sort of biddable and quiet. So being a place of conversation, that's one thing you might think that a really academic school looks like. But, what is scholarship? Scholarship, by the way, is, enjoying the environment of a library, and how lovely that we're in a library right now. But it is. It's thinking differently. And making space to, but let's not pretend that we could be in a complete results-free universe. I don't know what that would look like. It would be great. It would be great in some ways if we were, but they are there. They are helpful as a sort of starting point guide, but they absolutely... I often ask in fact, I have Open Door every week. I often ask the girl, particularly the ones who come in, year 10 or 11, getting a bit stressy about whatever, they've got exam mocks coming up, or, year 11 mocks or whatever. And I said, oh yeah, and just tell me what your parents got at GCSE. None of them have a clue. Because, guys, when was the last time you were asked what you got at GCSE, or even at O-level, if you're, when does it matter? It honestly doesn't. And as I say, let's build in a little bit of scruffiness around the edges of a results palette. How boring would it be if everyone did completely beautifully? Again, I feel like I'm kind of in it's like a confessional. But, I got 31% in my physics mock. There it is. It's a gift. I got 31% in my physics GCSE mock.
Thank you. I think we've only got time for one more question. Person over there, can't see over someone's head, but yeah.
For somebody who is very keen on attending a school, and very much how they saw it, would love to attend, but is quite late in the process, how would they be able to perhaps get in and perhaps be able to attend that school?
Great question.
Thank you for the amazing talk.
You're
Oh,
very
you're
welcome.
so
Thank
sweet.
you for coming. That's a great question. Elizabeth, would you like to take that one?
Look, number one is all the admissions teams are out there at the tables. Go and talk to them at your school. They will guide you. Some schools like us, we have a full admissions process, and then in May, just before you start, so before September, just a couple of months before, we have also a scholarship exam, and you can get in just directly that way as well, if you are at the very top end. But we're always interested in young people of talent, and we would always have that conversation and investigate it and give you some sense of what that might have, and things change, so you never know.
I mean, and just absolutely to endorse that, I think, and going back to an earlier question as well, I mean, how will you know whether it's the right place for your wonderful child? The admissions teams as well are phenomenal. They are phenomenal, and they are there to guide and to help you through your journey, hopefully to make it an enjoyable one. High bar. But, I do think really, again, sort of spending time with them, and no question is too small. And again, to your lovely question, and thank you so much for it, but I think occasional places now, again, I think there's more, people are moving more as well. They're moving countries. Everyone is more international. We are a very international institution, but, so there's often places that come up anyway. So it's always worth a phone call and a conversation with the admissions team.
Yeah, and just to round that off, I would definitely say if you're not successful in year 7, because it's full at that point, stay in touch with the school, because as Jenny said, people do leave. You might be able to go to your second choice school to start with and then move in year 8 or 9. But thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. I hope that's been useful. And yes, thanks again.